before we get into each individual movie, let's talk about the franchise as a whole.
Scream is my favorite horror movie ever made, period.
Well then.
I think it is. So really what it is I love slasher movies. It's simple, but I just love, masked killers chasing down victims. I mean, the first franchise that really got me into horror was Friday the 13th. And so Scream is like the next level of that, where it's not just a slasher, but it's making fun of the horror genre in general while still being a horror movie. It's a parody that takes itself seriously at the same time. I love when a film can combine horror and comedy, because at the end of the day, they're the two most difficult genres to nail down.
Yes.
When you're making a movie or making any kind of content. It's horror and comedy, because they work entirely on audience reactions. You're trying to get a reaction out of people. And for me, I feel like Scream simultaneously has high stakes and some pretty intense moments while still being funny as fuck.
You got to think about both genres of film. It's comedy, which is, once again, like you said, completely subjective, and it's horror, once again, completely subjective. And imagine trying to combine the two. That is the hardest thing. And let me tell you something. I told Squito this from the start. Horror and comedy, sometimes it could be the best, sometimes it could be the worst fucking thing I've ever watched. For me, it's always hit or miss. Scream hit it very well. Continue.
Yeah, because you have the horror comedies like Thanksgiving, which I'm never gonna fucking watch.
Yikes.
When I think of a horror comedy, I think of like Ready or Not.
Yeah,
Where
Ready
like
or
the
Not
premise, the premise is just so like out there, and they find a way to make the characters feel relatable, and that's where like the comedy comes from. It's normal people in a larger than life scenario, and I feel like Scream does a good job of keeping it pretty grounded in terms of just like all the Scream movies, not just the original, but it's pretty grounded in terms of Ghostface is just a guy in a mask with a knife.
Yes.
That is all the movies.
And they can't help but remind you that, like, every time that Ghostface is in a chase sequence, they're throwing beer bottles at him. He takes the worst falls imaginable. Yeah. Bro, that's why the garage door sequence is always going to be, like, living rent-free in my head. The amount of times that guy fell over is crazy. That's 100% Stu. 100%. Without a shadow of a doubt, that was Stu.
But yeah, no, if you can get horror and comedy right, it's you're flying. And for me, straight. Scream hits the nail right on the fucking head.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to the first Scream, I think it's easily, and I know we will not get everything out of the way here, mainly because a lot of this has already been said, but this is one thing I did want to bring up, even though it's been said a million times. Easily the most influential horror film of the 90s. That's not negotiable. It revitalized a genre that was dead and buried,
Mm-hmm.
So you got to give it props for that. Imagine a film being so good that it not only influences others, but paves a path for other movies within its genre. It's crazy because studios were not willing to bank on slashers anymore, and they gave them lower and lower and lower budgets because of the constant sequels that people were getting sick of, like a Friday the 13th or a Nightmare on Elm Street, even though New Nightmare was good. That's irrelevant.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's Wes Craven. And Wes Craven, who not only created Nightmare and did Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which was a meta commentary on that franchise, he also made Scream. Mm-hmm. So he just knows how to do horror. So I think it's just a matter of getting a filmmaker that knows what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah, I can tell you something right now that I've seen a lot of horror films, horror sequels, in fact, that they hire directors that are just trying to be safe and are just trying to get by with, offering a decent experience but not taking enough risk. And so when I watch a horror film that's like has passion deeply ingrained with it, I can truly resonate because they take risks, that kind of thing. I feel like a good example of this is Alien Romulus. It's definitely got some stealing of the lines or whatever, and I see why people don't like it. It never bothered me, but the Fede Alvarez, the director of that one, was also taking risk and was taking his time with creating the film because everything was done practically, and the new idea he has near the end of the film is really cool, along with some of the sequences that I'm surprised we've never seen or even thought of until I saw in Romulus, like the acid blood sequence. You know, just when you see new ideas being thrown into a franchise that you thought was dead and buried, it really shows that there was passion behind the filmmaking, and I feel like those films are always way better to watch, is when there's more experimentation, when you can see that there's more passion and a will to try something new. And that's what Scream did to the umpteenth degree. Nothing was ever as meta as Scream at the time. Yeah. It is what it is.
And I think for me, a great comparison from Scream to Alien Romulus is specifically Scream 5. Because it's the first Scream movie with new directors involved, and you know, just a whole new creative team in general, really. But you know, Alien Romulus was really a return to form for for Alien, for that franchise, and then they presented a lot of new ideas, and I think Scream 5 kind of falls in that same category of, you know, let's get back to basics while also, you know, paying homage and trying new things with the formula that we already know.
Right.
So, and another thing is, you know, I compared Scream to like Friday the 13th. A lot of those franchises, it's like a new director with every movie. And I think part of why Scream is so solid and so consistent as a franchise is because you have the writer, Kevin Williamson, who wrote Scream 1, 2, and 4. And then Wes Craven directed Screams 1 through 4. And then Scream 5 and 6 both got new directors. And they got Radio Silence, who did Ready or Not. They directed Scream 5 and 6, and then the same writers that did Ready or Not did Scream 5 and 6.
So there's a sort of resonant consistency. Yeah.
Yeah, that a lot of other franchises don't have. Because, I mean, you watch Friday the 13th, you go from, like, part 4, you know, the final chapter, and then you go to Jason Takes Manhattan, and it's two wildly different movies that don't have anything to do with one another. And there's no sense of continuity or lore really to those movies, but Scream is consistent all the way through. You have the same, you know, core cast of characters. The people that live in one movie tend to, you know, move on to the next one, and it just makes everything feel consistent. So you have the same directors, same crew, same writers, same cast. It just makes Scream as a whole feel more consistent compared to a lot of other horror movies where, you know, one movie will be good and then the next will be really bad. And you're like, damn, how did they fuck this one up? And you look at the behind the scenes and it's people that have never watched the other movies and they just got hired for this one.
That shit's always like, pissed me off.
Fuck it.
You can't dedicate 3 hours of your life, motherfucker. You know?
Yeah, right.
It's ridiculous.
It's just people that, you know, think they're entitled and they just get hired on a random job and they're like, well, shit, I guess I'll make some money from this.
Oh, Alien 4 all the way. Holy shit.
so they make a movie and they're just like, yeah, fuck it. You know, why not? So I think that's another reason why Scream is my favorite horror franchise, is that it's consistent through and through.
Yeah, I mean, the Scream franchise is literally just that. It is the most consistent horror franchise ever, period. Nightmare on Elm Street has a bunch of entries, and there's some high highs, and there's some low lows. Friday the 13th, there's a few highs, and then the rest are lows. Like, I feel like Nightmare is better than Friday the 13th in terms of fundamental quality, not objective. Fundamental quality, you know?
Yeah.
You can add that for pretty much everything. I mean, you could talk about the Hellraiser movies. I mean, I've never seen them, but I hear one's fine, and then the rest are horrible, and, you know, I believe them. Yeah.
I watched the original Hellraiser sometime last year, and I honestly didn't really like it. I went into it with no expectations, and I walked out, you know, well, not I say walked out, but like, when the movie was over, I was just kind of like, that's it?
I hear
maybe
you,
I gotta watch the others. Maybe I gotta watch like 2 and 3, and then maybe I'll get it. But with just one by itself, I wasn't impressed.
Well, you know, man.
Maybe that's a hot take. I don't know.
No, it's not.
I don't know general thoughts about Hellraiser.
All the other Hellraisers were straight to video for a reason, because the studio didn't believe in them. You know what I mean? If the studio don't believe in them, why should you? Fucking.
I did watch that remake that was on Hulu. Immediately after, because I'm like, oh, it's a remake. I'll watch the original and then the remake. It's ass, horrible. That remake was awful.
Yeah, that's why I always look at the IMDb ratings before, even though they can be wrong sometimes, like mainly they're wrong a lot on comedies. I feel because, comedy is really subjective and that's hard to measure on an objective scale.
Yeah.
But I feel like when it comes to IMDb, like anything above a 7 is worth a watch, even if it's not your kind of film. It's like good to experiment. Anything above a 7. And film-wise, I'm not talking TV shows. I'm talking movies. Anything above a 7 is usually worth a watch. So if it's below a 7, I tend to be more wary of it. There are still good movies in the 6s, absolutely. Some very underrated gems, that kind of thing. But I always tend to look at IMDb as like the general scale. That being said, anything below a 6, there's like 5 good movies. That's about it. That's it. I'm being honest, bro. Like if it's like a 5.5, oh man.
I mean, you mentioned like comedies getting lower scores. I feel like horror does kind of fall in that same category.
Yes, very
where
much
some
so.
critics would be like, "Oh, this is ass. It's not scary," and then you watch it and you're like, "This is actually pretty decent." Like,
right.
They're being way too hard on this.
Right, they are pretty hard on it, but I feel like movies that fall below like the 6.5 scale or whatever on horror, at least on IMDb, they tend to do that because they're a bit simplistic and they don't try a lot new. You know what I mean? There's like, it's a decent experience, but they wanted more. And I hear you. You know what I mean? I feel like that's also, sometimes it's infinitely more annoying to have a film that you see that could have done more but chose not to. You know what I mean? I felt that for watching the Speak No Evil 2024 flick. You know what I mean? It's like, I like it. I really did. But I really wish that third act just had some more gravitas. You know what I'm saying? And it didn't. That's it. But yeah, it is what it is. Anyway, Scream.
Yeah,
The Scream franchise is absolutely consistent in every single way. And I hear you that it's your favorite franchise. And dude, for me, it's like top 5. But the reason why I prefer Alien is simply because of the qualities of 1, 2, and Romulus. That being said, I will concede this. The Alien franchise is nowhere near as consistent. It is what it is. It's nowhere near as consistent. Because as soon as you get the 3 fucking off a cliff, immediately, and we don't...
And I mean, it's also... also just, I mean, we talked about it before. Horror is a really subjective thing.
Yeah.
A lot of people would probably find the idea of Ghostface to be silly. It's like, it's just a dude in a mask. Just kick his ass, It's like, what's so difficult about that? But then, you have other people that, maybe they would prefer something like The Conjuring. It's like, oh, I prefer like the more paranormal stuff.
Yeah.
That,
it's very
that entices me more. And it's not really like, I don't want to see a dude running around with a mask. But for me, I like slashers. Slashers for me are just the fun ones where it's just, okay, the goal is to kill as many people as possible. How creative can we get with this? And then you're just you're off for the ride, because I'm not watching a Friday the 13th for the story. Halloween maybe, because Halloween also does have returning characters pretty consistently.
But you really want, I think what separates these films a lot is not just the kills or the iconic look of a killer, but it's also the hidden themes throughout, and
for sure.
Scream channels that so well. Like every single film has that feeling. I mean, hell, Scream 3 was talking about touched on the subject of lead stars having relations with producers in order to get films, and then I looked at the credits and I saw that Harvey Weinstein produced Scream 3. I'm like, oh shit!
The irony is crazy.
They warned us 20 years before, and we were just too stupid. Yeah, that's it.
It's like, how did they get away with this?
Yeah. Because I doubt Harvey even watched it. He was too busy looking at the woman in the front row. You know what I mean? That's a fucking disgusting piece of shit. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, Scream, that's another reason why I love Scream, is that it's always relevant, because it's making fun of the horror genre, and so it's always about how can you like twist it to fit the current state of the horror genre, because the genre is always evolving, and so Scream evolves with it. Scream 4 is about remakes, and it came out in a time when remakes were like the new big thing. And then Scream 5 legacy sequels, that's a big thing in Hollywood right now. Legacy sequels. Scream 6 franchises. Franchises are the new hotness, right?
Bro.
Everything's got to be a franchise. Everything's got to connect with a cinematic universe.
That scene where the one chick was like talking about requels and legacy sequels. Bro, immediately I'm like, this was the pitch meeting for Scream 5. This is exactly,
for sure.
This is exactly how it went.
And it's also, I mean, the directors, we'll get to 5 when we talk about it, but the directors were also very nervous about doing it because it's a beloved franchise, and this is the first one without Wes Craven because he unfortunately passed away in 2015. And so you don't want it to seem like a cash grab. It's like, oh, the studio's making another Scream, just for money. And Wes Craven's dead, they can do whatever they want with it. But no, they hired filmmakers that actually gave a shit. Scream, they consider Scream to be their favorite horror movie ever made, and it's very influential in their filmmaking. So I think choosing Radio Silence to do 5 and 6 was really the perfect choice.
Yeah, dude. And I think Radio Silence did really well, and I was actually surprised because I watched Ready or Not and I saw what they were able to do with smaller budgets. And I, of course, in preparation for this tier list, I finally watched Scream 5 and 6 for the first time, and it had Radio Silence all over it. Like,
oh, yeah.
It really did feel like a Radio Silence movie. So, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. 5 especially just feels like Wes Craven and their style, like, combined. Because they took a lot from Wes Craven's Scream movies, as they should. And then even the entire like finale is a memorial for him because they named the character Wes, and so they had like when they were all taking shots for Wes. So it's Scream 5 is just a tribute movie, and then 6 is Radio Silence being like, all right, now this is 100% us. This is what we can bring.
And you could tell
the franchise.
The tonal shift is crazy.
Yeah.
Overall, I just want to say that the Scream franchise, once again, is the most consistent franchise in horror history. And
it's not perfect.
It's not
by
perfect.
Any means.
That's why I say consistent. It's not perfect,
consistent,
but it's consistent. I just want to say that now that I finally finished the Scream franchise, I can tell you right now, this is going to be an annual rewatch. It is what it is.
It's so good.
It's really good. Like, this is, like I said, annual rewatch with the Alien trilogy, 1, 2, and Romulus. That's all it is to me. That's all it is to me, is the Alien trilogy. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I'd probably fast forward through, like, the second act of Scream 3, but that's it. That's it.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not like the Alien rewatch where part of me was like, man, I gotta watch Resurrection and Alien 3. It's like, no, with Scream, as soon as like this idea was brought up, I was like, yeah, fuck yeah, I'll rewatch all these movies. And I watched 3 through 6 like nearly all back to back within the span of like a couple days.
You should have seen his eyes light up when I asked. It's like, okay, which franchise do you want to do first? Scream? It's like,
gotta
Scream?
be Scream. Yeah.
Squirrel!
Yeah. Gotta be Scream.
Oh, that's real. But yeah, gotta love the Scream franchise, man. Gotta love it.
Yeah.
I
mean...
Well, go ahead.
We're going to talk about the original 1996. I mean, how better do you start a franchise than with one of the greatest opening kills of all time?